Rain slashed the earth like whips from the heavens. Thunder cracked the silence of the plains, each boom rolling across the sky like the voice of God himself. In the mud and shadows of a dying fire, Eliza McGraw crawled, bloodied, barefoot, belly swollen with life, and eyes wide with betrayal. She dragged herself forward, each inch a war. Her dress was torn from shoulder to hem, soaked in mud, blood, and rain. Hair once honey blonde now clung to her face like seaweed on a corpse. She gasped, choking on the cold night air. Her right hand pressed to her side where a boot had struck her ribs. Broken, probably. The world tilted, and for a moment, she lay still. She wasn't sure if she was crying anymore. The rain made it impossible to tell. It had all gone wrong so fast. 2 days ago, she'd still believed Jed might be changing. That maybe, just maybe, the man she'd married under duress had something human left in him. He'd spoken sweet that morning, kissed her cheek like it meant something. They'd ridden out to get away from the smoke of town, he'd said, just the two of them. It wasn't love, not after what he'd done, but hope was a cruel, addicting thing. She thought maybe for the baby's sake they could survive. Now she lay in the mud, ribs screaming, wrists raw from rope, blood dripping down her thigh. He'd done this. Jed, her husband. He'd robbed a bank the month before, killed a sheriff's deputy. The law was closing in. She'd beg him to stop running. He'd laughed, said a pregnant wife made a fine decoy. Then last night, he made camp beneath the cottonwoods, built a fire, kissed her neck like a man in love, and kicked her in the stomach the moment she turned her back. "You're slowing me down, Eliza," he said. "The baby too. We had a good run, didn't we?" Then he'd taken a horse, the food, the rifle, left her there with the wolves. The wind howled, or maybe it was the coyotes again. Her hand curled over her belly, still hard, still warm, still moving. Please, she thought, please stay alive. She reached a twisted log and collapsed beside it, breath ragged. Darkness swam at the edges of her vision. The world smelled of wet pine and her own fear. For a moment, she considered letting go. Close her eyes. Let the cold take her. But then movement. Tiny. Barely there. A flutter beneath her palm. The baby kicked. Tears came then. Real ones. "No," she whispered. "Not yet." She pushed up, using the log for balance. Her legs trembled. Pain flashed through her side like lightning. She bit down on a scream. Step. Stumble. Step again. The plain stretched endless around her. No sign of shelter. No firelight in the distance. Just the vast belly of the night. She didn't know how long she walked. Time was no longer measured in hours or stars, but in footsteps between pain and collapse. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. The wind shifted. And then, hoofbeats. She froze, body tense. Heartbeat in her ears like war drums. Was it Jed? Had he come back to finish the job? She ducked low into a cluster of shrubs, holding her breath as the sound grew louder. Fast, purposeful, not galloping, but steady. Her fingers clutched the wet branches. A shadow emerged against the horizon, mounted, tall, and wrapped in furs. A stranger. Lightning flashed, and for a second, she saw the rider clearly. A man with braids, sharp eyes, face painted in streaks of red and black. Cheyenne, she thought, heart-pounding. Her mind raced with old stories told in whispers around campfires. Some true, most not. She couldn't run. Not now. The rider slowed, sensing something. His eyes swept the landscape. Eliza's knees buckled. She collapsed fully into the brush, groaning. He turned his horse toward the sound. She tried to crawl, but managed only an inch before her arms gave out. The horse stopped feet from her. A silence stretched. Then the voice, low, cautious. "You are hurt." His English was accented, deliberate. She flinched, half expecting a blade. Instead, he dismounted. She looked up into his face. Not young, not old. Scarred across the chin. Eyes dark as coal, but not unkind. He knelt beside her, touched her arm. She tensed. Don't hurt me." "I do not hurt women," he said. "You are heavy with child." She laughed, bitter and broken. Brilliant observation. He didn't react to the sarcasm. Instead, He pressed fingers to her wrist. Her pulse was faint. He frowned, then turned, whistled sharply. From the distance came another horse, smaller, leaner. He lifted her as easily as if she were a wounded deer. "Put me down," she groaned. "No. Why help me? I could be trouble." "You are almost dead," he replied simply. "Trouble does not crawl in mud with broken ribs." She said nothing more. She didn't have the strength. The storm had eased by the time they reached the ridge. He guided the horse with ease, moving silent as smoke. Eliza's head lolled against his chest, breath shallow. She drifted in and out, visions of Jed's boots, the firelight, the snap of her own bones, each memory knifing through the fog. She came to in a tent of stitched hides, warm and smoky. Her dress had been replaced with a soft tunic, her wounds bound tight. She started to panic until she saw her belly, still full, still moving. "You live," said the voice again. She turned. He sat cross-legged near the fire, sharpening a blade. The tent smelled of cedar and sage. "Who are you?" she asked. "My name is Tessina. Where am I? A half day from death, if I had not found you." She didn't smile, but her eyes flickered. "Then I suppose I owe you." "You owe no one," he said. "But you carry life. That must be protected." She studied him. His movements were calm, precise. There was no pity in his gaze, only observation. "I don't have a name anymore," she muttered. He didn't ask questions. Didn't press. She liked that. Days passed. She healed slowly. Tessina brought herbs and boiled meat. He never lingered long, always quiet, always watchful. Eliza asked little. She didn't have the strength for stories. Not yet. But when she slept, the nightmares came. Jed's face above hers, snarling. The thud of his boot. The sound of him riding away. One night, she woke screaming. Tessina appeared moments later, blade in hand. "It was just a dream," she whispered. He crouched beside her, handed her water. "Dreams are memories that refuse to die." "You speak like a preacher." "I have killed too many men to be a preacher." That earned a dry, broken laugh. A week passed. Her ribs mended enough for movement. She walked the perimeter of the small camp, feeling sun again on her skin. The baby kicked more now, stronger. She spoke to it sometimes. Useless words. Soothing lies. "You'll never meet your father," she told the bump. "And that's the first gift I'll ever give you." Tessina didn't ask what happened. But one evening, as the sun bled over the mountains, she told him anyway. "He left me to die," she said, voice quiet. "Said I was slowing him down. He took everything and kicked me in the belly. If you hadn't found me, we'd be bones." He nodded once. "Some men are beasts." "I wanted to believe he could change," she whispered. "That is a woman's strength. And her curse." She looked at him. "What's yours?" He didn't answer, just stared into the fire. That night, she dreamed of fire and wolves, of Jed's voice echoing in the darkness. But when she woke, it was to the warmth of a fire, the steady beat of a drum somewhere distant, and a strange new certainty in her heart. She was not dead, and she would never be his victim again. Not ever. In the dark, beneath a sky full of stars, the wind whispered through the trees. She listened, and for the first time, she didn't hear fear. She heard the road calling. The campfire crackled softly, casting flickering shadows across the leather walls of the teepee. Eliza sat cross-legged on a thick buffalo hide, her hands wrapped around a wooden bowl of broth. The scent of boiled roots and herbs drifted through the smoke. She sipped cautiously, the heat biting her cracked lips. Across from her, Tessina worked in silence, stringing a line of beads into a long cord. His hands moved with quiet certainty, every motion purposeful. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was something like peace. A rare thing. Outside, the wind hummed across the prairie. She could hear the distant sounds of movement, others nearby, faint voices speaking a language she didn't understand. She'd seen glimpses of them over the last few days. A few elders. Children who stared at her with wide, curious eyes. A woman with a braid down to her waist who brought her clean linens and strong-smelling teas. They didn't speak to her directly, but they didn't seem hostile either. She was something between a guest and a ghost. Tessina didn't hover. He didn't ask questions. But he watched, observed, protected. She was grateful for it. Grateful for the silence. Words hadn't done her much good before. Her life had been bartered in them. Promises, lies, oaths made with poisoned tongues. So she kept quiet and healed. Her ribs still ached. The bruises had faded to a mottled yellow, but the deeper wounds, the ones inside, still throbbed. Sometimes she woke up gasping, certain she could hear Jed's boots outside. Sometimes she forgot where she was until she saw the gentle curve of the teepee wall and smelled the clean, earthy scent of sage and firewood. It grounded her. This place. These people. Him. "Why did you help me?" she asked finally, her voice low. Tessina didn't look up. "Because you needed help. You don't know me. You were dying. That was enough." She set her bowl down. "I could have been anyone. A thief. A liar. An outlaw." He nodded. "Maybe. But you were pregnant. That makes you sacred." That word struck her like a stone. Sacred. No one had ever used it for her. Not when she was a girl dreaming of the stars beyond her tiny Kentucky town. Not when she married Jed to save her brother's life. Not even when she'd first learned she was carrying a child. She had never felt sacred. Just scared. "You live here alone?" she asked, changing the subject. "No," he said. "This is a hunting camp. I return when I need rest." "And the others? They don't mind a stranger." "They are wary. The old stories are deep. But they see your belly. That changes things." "You keep bringing that up. It matters." She wanted to argue. Wanted to say she wasn't some symbol or holy vessel. But then the baby kicked again, a sharp little jab beneath her ribs, and she winced. Maybe it did matter. "I was married once," he said after a long pause. "We had a son. He died before he walked." She looked at him, surprised. It was the first piece of his past he'd offered. "I'm sorry. She died too," he added, voice steady. "Raiding party came through while I hunted. White men. Took her scalp like it was meat. My brother buried her." Eliza said nothing. The silence stretched like a wound between them. "Now I live here," he said simply. "No more village. No more blood." She could feel his pain, not in his voice, which was even, but in the way he avoided her gaze. There was something haunted in him, something she recognized. She knew that kind of grief. The kind that sat in your chest like a stone and refused to move. "I wasn't supposed to live either," she murmured. "Jed, he's the father. He's also the one who left me to die. I thought the wolves would finish me off." Tessina's jaw tightened. She continued, eyes unfocused. "He wasn't always like that. Or maybe he was, and I was too stupid to see it. My father owed him money. Jed offered to clear the debt if he gave me over. So I married him. I thought I could survive it." "You did. I survived the wrong things." He reached forward, gently took her wrist. "You're still here." The contact startled her, not because it was sudden, but because it wasn't rough. No demand. No power behind it. Just reassurance. "Still here," she repeated. Later that day, she stepped outside the teepee for the first time. The air was cool and crisp, the grass tall and gold in the sun. Children ran across the hilltops, laughing. A few glanced her way and then turned back to their games. The elder woman from before nodded at her and handed her a bundle of soft herbs. "She says chew these when the pain comes," Tessina translated. "They will not hurt the child." Eliza gave a small smile. "Tell her thank you." He did. That afternoon, he showed her how to use a bow. She held it awkwardly at first, arms shaking. "Relax your shoulders," he instructed. "Draw with your back, not your arms." "Do you teach all your guests this?" "You are not a guest. You are preparing." "For what?" "For when he comes." Her mouth went dry. "You think he'll come back?" she asked. "He will not leave something unfinished. Not a man like that." She looked down at her hands. "Then I need a gun, not a bow." "A gun is loud. Requires powder. A bow whispers." She tried again. Pulled the string. Let go. The arrow flopped to the dirt 2 feet in front of her. He didn't laugh. Just nodded. Again. By the 5th shot, she hit the hay target. By the 10th, she struck near center. Sweat ran down her back, but something else stirred in her chest, something fierce and unfamiliar. That night, she dreamed of standing in a canyon, bow in hand, the sky above streaked red. Jed was there too, reaching for her. But this time she didn't run. She didn't scream. She drew the string and let it fly. When she woke, she was smiling. In the following days, she grew stronger, walked farther, helped gather kindling, even laughed once when Tessina slipped trying to climb a rock. "You're not as graceful as you pretend to be," she teased. He raised an eyebrow. "I was testing a stone." "Sure you were." Their banter was dry, spare, but it filled the silence with something warmer than fire. One morning, a scout rode into camp at dawn. Urgent voices outside the teepee. Tessina returned with a narrowed gaze. "What is it?" she asked. "Tracks horsemen. White men. They found a camp north of here. Burned it." Her heart sank. "He's coming, isn't he?" He didn't answer. Instead, he handed her a leather bundle. Inside was a bow, 3 arrows, and a small hunting knife. She looked at him, confused. "You're giving me this now? You have healed. Now you learn." She nodded slowly. Her breath came tight. That evening, as the sun melted over the plains, she sat beside Tessina near the fire. Neither spoke for a long while. The baby kicked again, stronger than ever, and she placed a hand over her belly, protective now, not fearful. "I used to think being strong meant never crying," she said softly. "But now I think it means standing back up after you've been knocked down." Tessina nodded. "And not letting the one who knocked you down stand for long." She looked at him, surprised by the quiet threat in his voice. "You sound like you've been waiting to kill him." "I have not," he said, "but I will not let you face him alone." The fire cracked between them. She thought of Jed, of the hollow way his eyes looked when he lied, of the smell of whiskey on his breath, of the way he never looked back. She wasn't the same woman he'd left for dead. And next time, she would be the one walking away. The wind picked up, carrying smoke and the scent of rain. Far off in the distance, thunder grumbled once more. The first sign was the smoke, thin and gray, curling on the horizon like a warning. Tessina stood on the ridge with his hand over his brow, watching it with the stillness of a predator. Eliza stood beside him, her hand resting on her belly, heart thudding like distant drums. The sky above was the same wide stretch of blue. The grass still waved in the wind, but the air had changed. Tighter, tense. He didn't say anything at first, just pointed. "They're burning again." She didn't need to ask who. Only one man left a trail like that. Jed. Her stomach tightened. The baby shifted as if it, too, sensed the return of the monster. How close? Less than a day. Eliza stared at the smoke, feeling her lungs compress. All the peace of the past weeks drained away in an instant. That peace had always been borrowed time. Now the debt had come due. "We should run," she said. The words tasted wrong. Tessina didn't look at her. "We run. He finds someone else to punish. Another camp. Another family." She already knew that. Still, some part of her wanted to grab the horse and ride as far as her swollen body would allow. Not for herself, but for the child. But another part, buried deep in her bones, was tired of running. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake, hand tracing slow circles over her stomach, listening to the crackle of the fire and the distant whisper of grass in the wind. Tessina sat outside the teepee sharpening his knife in rhythmic motions. She could hear it, scrape, scrape, pause. Scrape again. It was a sound of certainty, a sound that said war was coming. By morning, the first body was found. A Cheyenne boy barely 13 had been sent ahead to scout the western trails. He didn't return. His father found him slumped over his pony near the creek, throat cut, eyes wide open, blood soaking the saddle. A crude note was pinned to his chest. "Tell the girl I'm coming." Tessina read it aloud without inflection. Eliza didn't cry. She couldn't. The fear in her had calcified into something harder, colder. She took the bow he'd given her and began to string it. The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. The small camp shifted from peace to readiness like a sleeping beast waking for battle. Spears were sharpened. Horses were fed double. Fires burned low at night. Everyone moved with the quiet understanding of people who had seen violence before and knew it would come again. Tessina trained her harder, not with kindness, but with clarity. Draw faster. Don't flinch. Wider stance. Every mistake earned her silence, not scolding. But every small victory, a bullseye, a silent step, a proper throw, earned a nod of approval. She lived for those nods. At dusk on the third day, they found tracks near the northern ridge. 4 riders. Heavy boot prints. Cigar butts. One of them had pissed on a sacred tree and carved a crude face into the bark. They're close, Tessina said. Let's end this. That night, they rode out together. Eliza wore a thick doeskin tunic over her belly and carried the bow across her back. A knife hung at her side, small but sharp. Her hands shook only once, when she looked down and remembered Jed's hands wrapped around her throat. She closed her eyes and saw the moment he kicked her into the dirt. The cold. The breath leaving her body. The sound of the horse galloping away. No, not again. They found the gangs camped tucked in a grove by the river. 4 horses tethered nearby. Saddles leaned against trees. The scent of tobacco and liquor wafted through the brush. Eliza crouched beside Tessina, staring at the flickering firelight. Jed's not with them, she said. Her voice was too steady for how loud her heart pounded. He will come soon. They waited. 10 minutes. 20. Then the sound of hooves. Jed rode in like he owned the night, boots polished, coat clean, face smirking as if the land itself bowed to him. He was leaner than she remembered, sharper in the face, but the swagger was the same. He laughed with the men, passed around a flask, tossed a stolen necklace into the fire. Tessina looked at her. Ready. She nodded. They attacked just before dawn. Tessina moved like smoke, silent, sudden, merciless. An arrow took down the first man before he could scream. The second reached for his revolver and got a blade in the neck. Eliza moved behind them, heart hammering, hands trembling on the bow. A shot rang out, Jed yelling, "They're here. It's her. Kill the squaw lover." She saw him then, across the fire, gun in hand, his eyes locked on hers. He smiled. "Well, look at that," he said, voice loud, cruel. "You didn't die after all." He raised the pistol. She dropped and rolled. The shot missed by inches, bark exploding behind her. Tessina shouted something, but she was already up, moving through the trees, breath ragged. Jed followed, boots thudding, laughing. "You think you're something now, huh? Got yourself a new man? I ought to cut that baby out of you just to remind you where you came from." She ran until her lungs burned, until the forest thinned and the river glittered ahead. Then she stopped, turned. He stepped into view, gun raised. "No more games," he said. "You're right." She raised the bow. He laughed. "You're gonna shoot me? Like that? Barefoot and knocked up?" The arrow flew. It struck his shoulder. High, not fatal, but enough to twist him sideways. He screamed and fired wildly. She ducked. Pain ripped across her thigh. Not deep. A graze. He charged, screaming. She drew the knife. They collided like thunder. He grabbed her hair, slammed her against a tree, fist smashing into her cheek. She stabbed wildly, once, twice, one hit, one miss. Blood soaked into her tunic. He shoved her down, straddled her, fists raining down. "I made you," he roared. "I own you." She jammed the knife upward with both hands. Straight into his gut. His mouth fell open. She twisted. He fell off her, gasping, clutching the wound. His blood painted the grass. She crawled away, coughing, dizzy. Tessina burst through the trees moments later, bow raised. He saw her, then Jed. Jed looked up at him, laughing weakly. "She did it," he rasped. "You're a little woman." Eliza stood, bloody and shaking. "Not your woman," she said. She raised the bow one last time. The arrow hit him between the eyes. Jed McGraw didn't make another sound. Later, they burned the bodies. The smoke rose high and bitter into the morning sky. Eliza sat by the river, hands stained, muscles trembling. The baby kicked again, strong and steady. She placed her hand over it. "You're safe now," she whispered. Tessina crouched beside her. "It is finished," he said. She didn't reply right away, just stared at the fire, watching the past burn. "No," she said softly. "It's just beginning." The flames had long died out, but the smoke lingered, thin trails curling into the dawn like ghosts. Eliza stood barefoot in the river, washing blood from her hands. Her reflection stared back, bruised but unbroken, eyes darker than she remembered. Behind her, the embers of Jed McGraw's pyre smoldered, the last of his cruelty dissolving into ash. She dipped her hands again, the cold water numbing her fingers. Each ripple distorted the face in the water, but even with the warping waves, she saw something she hadn't seen in years: herself. Tessina watched her from the bank, silent as ever. He'd stood beside her in battle, in silence, in the aftermath. He hadn't spoken of the kill, hadn't praised her or pitied her. That was the deepest respect. He let her own the moment. She stepped out of the water, her legs shaky, her thigh still aching from the graze. He offered his hand. She didn't take it, not because she didn't want to, but because she needed to feel the ground beneath her feet, unassisted, just once. They walked back toward the camp without speaking. The sun had begun to rise, casting long golden streaks through the grass. It should have felt like an ending. The villain dead, the danger past. But Eliza felt no such thing. Not yet. When they reached the teepee, she sat beside the fire and held her belly. The baby kicked, strong, alive, relentless. She smiled slightly. Not from joy, not entirely. From defiance. Her child had survived Jed's boots, the wilderness, hunger, gunfire. That wasn't luck. That was something stronger. Tessina handed her a fresh cloth, damp with herbs. She placed it on the bruise blooming along her cheekbone. It stung, but she welcomed the pain. It meant she was still here. "He'll be buried in that place forever," Tessina said quietly. "No one will disturb it." "Good," she said. "Let the earth forget him." But she wouldn't. Not fully. Not yet. Jed would live in the scars on her ribs, in the nightmares she would likely carry for years. Healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant living anyway. That night, the people of the camp gathered, not to celebrate, but to mark a passage. Elders lit sage and whispered prayers into the smoke. Drums beat low and steady like a second heartbeat. Eliza sat among them, surrounded but not smothered. A place had been made for her. Not by words, not by declaration, by fire and blood and survival. A woman, older, eyes like river stones, placed a hand on Eliza's stomach and whispered something in Cheyenne. Eliza didn't understand, but she nodded anyway. She understood the feeling. "You have made them proud," Tessina said later as they sat beside the outer fire, just the two of them. "I didn't do it for them." "No, but they recognize truth when they see it." Eliza looked at him. The firelight played across his face, softened the sharp edges. She saw the scar along his chin, the old pain in his eyes. But also something new. Respect. Maybe even admiration. She swallowed. "You've lost more than I can imagine." He didn't answer. "But you still chose to help me, when it would have been easier to walk away. I saw someone worth saving. You didn't know that then." He turned to her, expression calm. "I knew enough." They sat in silence again, but this one was different, comfortable, filled with things that didn't need saying. The fire crackled. The stars watched. As the days passed, her body mended. The wound in her leg closed. The bruises faded. The tension in her shoulders slowly began to release. She walked further, helped gather herbs, learned to bind wounds. The people didn't treat her like an outsider anymore. Children ran past her without staring. The old woman gave her a carved talisman for the baby's safe arrival. Tessina taught her how to skin rabbits, how to read the tracks of elk, how to listen to the wind like it had a voice. One morning, they rode together to the top of a high ridge. The world stretched out before them, open, wild, endless. She stared at it, heart full of something she couldn't name. "Everything feels new," she said softly. "It is. But I don't know where I fit in it." "You are alive," he said. You already fit." She turned to him, suddenly full of emotion. "I used to think surviving was all there was. Just getting through each day. And now I think maybe there's more." A wind rose over the ridge, tugging at their hair, their clothes. He reached out then, not to help her, not to save her, but to simply hold her hand. She let him. The months that followed passed quietly, but not idly. She grew rounder, heavier. Her muscles firmed. Her laugh returned, hesitant at first, then fuller. She learned the names of the plants, the stories in the stars. She spoke more of her past, but only when she chose to. And he listened, never interrupting. The birth came on a stormy night. Rain pounded the teepee roof, thunder shook the earth, but inside, the fire burned warm and strong. The elder women gathered around her, guiding her with gentle, firm hands. Tessina stood outside, waiting, the storm washing over him. She screamed. She bled. She nearly broke. But then, a cry. Sharp. Loud. Alive. The baby was placed in her arms, swaddled and blinking, red-faced and perfect. A boy. She cried then. Not from pain. From release. Tessina entered only when beckoned. He knelt beside her, gazed down at the child. "He is strong," he said. "He had to be." She looked up at him, eyes bright. "We're naming him Caden. It means he who rises." He nodded slowly. "It fits." She leaned her head back against the furs, exhaustion washing over her. But behind it was peace. Days later, as she held her son beneath the open sky, she thought of a girl who had been left in the mud to die. The girl who had crawled through blood and storm, who had felt death's breath on her neck and refused to surrender. That girl was gone. In her place stood a woman reborn in fire and fury, who had taken back her story one arrow, one step, one breath at a time. She looked out over the plains, the wind stirring the grass like waves on an ocean. "I am not what he made me," she whispered to her child. "I am what I chose to become." The fire behind her roared. The people gathered once more, singing the birth songs, offering blessings. There was no priest, no written record, just smoke, stars, and stories. Eliza McGraw was no longer a name tied to a man's crime. She was legend now, and legends didn't beg for mercy. They made the world remember them. The night drew on, filled with laughter and music. Somewhere beyond the ridge, wolves howled. But she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She looked at Tessina beside her, at the firelight dancing in his eyes, and at the boy in her arms. Her family, her future. And for the first time in her life, she felt whole. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below.